Hey folks. You're getting the blue background because right over there is the yellow background and it's a mess. So figured I wouldn't, abuse you with that view. But I have had a wonderful day. Wonderful day. Turns out, you're about to get a very different background because we're moving out of our house for a week or so as a film crew moves in here to shoot a TV episode. So stay tuned. I signed an NDA, so I can't tell you anything about that, but it's going to be very cool. And completely unrelated to that, I had a wonderful conversation this morning with a good friend, and the conversation went through all kinds of territories. It was a pretty profound one, but one thing sort of stood out. I'm always on the lookout for when I either come to a new understanding of a term, or I get I feel like a new definition of either a term or a phrase or a concept or a principle just kind of pops into my mind or emerges out of the thought process of a conversation or whatever. And so this morning we were talking about how as we all go through the various kinds of work that we all do, in the sense of like some of us, I call it spiritual work, and I made a very distinct decision at one point in my life that I was going to put that at the top of everything. I was going to say explicitly deep contemplative and ultimately spiritual work, the work of connecting with ultimate reality, whatever that means. And a lot of, initially that kind of just meant meditation, but it has since come to mean so much more, and an entire relationship to life, which it already had that meaning back then, but that it's, what I find fascinating is that as I continue to do that work, the definition keeps getting an update, an upgrade, not just in terms of how I define it, but in terms of how I feel it, what my body, my core really know to be the truth about this practice, and the sort of my deeper connection to it. That keeps evolving, it keeps changing. And so today was sort of a step in that process, because we were talking about how when we're doing spiritual work or we're doing inner work, a lot of times there'll be, especially when we're starting out, and if you've been doing this for a while, then we may notice this in ourselves, but we may also witness it in other people in our orbit who are kind of just starting to, this is coming online for them as a thing, and they're sort of they're beginning to really investigate deeply, well, what does it mean to do this work? What does it mean to orient my life around these principles or these practices? And in that early phase, it's kind of easy to not to go to start the practice. The practice generally works great when you first start, feels great, and we get this rush of, yeah, I'm onto something. I'm taking charge. I'm sort of like I'm overcoming things that have held me back in the past. There's a kind of rush of early success that comes, not always, but frequently, when we really get serious there's generally a rush of early success that kind of feeds us with energy and conviction and confidence, and it infuses us with a sense of this works, right? This work works. But then, if we are still sort of in the early phases of our work, it's really easy for setbacks or downturns in that energy to cause us to doubt that the process is working or that the practice is the right one. And I know this all too well from myself, and I also I know it quite well from witnessing many other people in a similar situation to me, where it basically kind of it's like we catch that first wave, and that first wave is just so great, and we ride it and it feels amazing, and then we just get slammed by a series of waves and we get tumbled, or the water goes dead and there's no more waves to catch. I'm exploring wave metaphors, as you can tell. But there's a downturn, and we get kind of and if we're still at the beginning of the process, it's easy to think, oh well, that didn't work. Yeah, it worked for a little while, but really in the long run, spiritual work doesn't really get you anywhere. It just kind of makes you feel good for a while, but then you end up right back where you started, or it's just not. It feels, it's kind of like doing a drug. Like, it gives you a rush for a little while, but then once the newness wears off, it's just like anything else. It doesn't actually move you. It's easy to feel that, and honestly, it's understandable to feel that, because the truth is, the truth is that progress is slow in the long run, and well, progress is slow for periods of time, and then progress can be instantaneous. And at certain thresholds in the process, progress can be instantaneous, faster than the speed of light. But my point is, when we're in this early phase of the work, and I think I in some ways count myself among that cohort. Even though I feel like I've also been practicing for much of my life, and I've been interested in this for much of my life, but I still sense that there are levels I've never gone to, and there's a level of commitment that is still, I'm there, but I feel like I still get tested here and there. I feel like the universe still kind of throws up these questions for me. Like, how deeply do you really believe this? How deeply do you really believe? And this is where the conversation this morning with my friend ultimately led to, because what came through in that is that there's a definition of faith that emerged as we were speaking, that I found fascinating, because faith is essentially that conviction that the practice is working, even when it seems like it's not working. And if we're kind of novices, then we have less evidence that it works. If you're a deeply practiced, if you look at like a Sadhguru or a Chogyam Trungpa or a Thich Nhat Hanh or the Dalai Lama, choose your favorite spiritual teacher, Eckhart Tolle. Some of the deep thinkers, spiritual leaders of our time. There's no doubt in their mind that the practice works. They're not, and it's not because, I don't think it's because they never have a bad day, or they never have a day when it's when everything doesn't go their way, and they think, I'm sure that there are still obstacles for them to wrestle with. But I get the sense that people of that level of experience are simply so anchored in the faith of the practice that, which is where we're all trying to get to, because then when those setbacks come and the doubt comes and we seem to be looking at evidence that the process isn't working, right? That's what the universe does. That's the test. You get evidence, seeming evidence, that the practice isn't working. I'm still doing the same. I've been dissolving my patterns for months now, and I walk outside and I still manifest the same pattern. Oh my God. It's still there. It hasn't moved at all. My patterns haven't changed, right? We feel this sense of frustration that things haven't shifted or things haven't moved or whatever it is. And so then the question becomes, well, can we have faith? Can we have faith in the practice? Now, I am one who has always sort of, in my own thinking and in my own practice, I've always really been an advocate of gathering evidence to support a claim. We don't want to have faith that is simply a kind of blind allegiance to something without really investigating what's going on, like what that's really about. I mean, that's where we get all kinds of weird dogma and weird, attachment to perspectives and practices and even traditions that are just not, that's not what, that to me, that's not what faith is. Faith is not just buying the story because the story is what will save us. Like that's not how I'm trying to define faith. But there is always and inherently, and it's built into the nature of faith, built into the nature of life, I suppose, that faith involves belief beyond what we can currently see. So there's this dichotomy. There's this, not a dichotomy, but a tension between our rational, evidence-based mind, and I'm not just talking about scientific evidence. I'm not just talking about like external materialistic evidence. I'm talking about any experiential evidence. Ken Wilber is a master of articulating how we can take a purely empirical approach to spiritual practice, and a community of people who have done the practice can have an essentially scientific conversation about the process, because they've all observed these phenomena. They've lived these experiences. They're interior experiences. They're not exterior. They're not experiments you can run out here in the world. They're experiments you can run in here, in the heart, in the mind, in the psyche, in our consciousness. So but that's still evidence. That's still an empirical process that we're going through. Just maybe an interior. The objects of observation may be interior rather than exterior. But even that, there's going to be a gap between that empirical process and faith, because faith is always going to be this element that draws us beyond what we can prove, what we can put our flag in the ground and say we know. And that's kind of the point of faith, is that it leads us on, and it leads us onward. It leads us forward. It takes us forward. And I think where the conversation this morning was going was around how, especially when we're working with, friends or loved ones or people who might still be questioning the process, questioning the finding their particular form of this practice, and it really kind of investigating, well, what's going to work for me? Will this work for me? Trying it on. There's a moment where the best thing we can do is offer encouragement and support and invite them into a faith that we will all, in our own way, establish firmly through evidence as we grow, as we live our lives and go through the practice. But what has come up as I've just discussed this here on this post even is just this tension between the kind of empirical, what we all agree, not all of us necessarily, but what most of the people I talk to would agree that evidence is that finding evidence for our claims is part of how we establish truth. So that's important. But then there's this faith element, and it's doesn't quite go in a box so easily. And appreciating that that's the same whether you're a novice or a master. We're all taking that leap of faith. It's a leap of faith. It's not a step we can see. We see where the next step is. Can't always see where the leap is going to take you. So, yeah, that's what's percolating in my brain today. But thank you for watching, people. So much love. I appreciate you. I can't wait to show you the backdrop of tomorrow's video. But have a great night or a great day. I'll see you soon.